be doing a portrait tutorial, and this time we're going to be using alcohol markers. This is going to be my first alcohol markers tutorial, if I'm not mistaken. I will be using my Ohuhu markers, and I will be mentioning and listing out the exact marker names I used, and the focus of today will be layering the colors so they work specifically for portraits. We will be drawing Angelina Jolie, the queen herself. I already have my line work sketched out, and if you want to trace the line work for yourself so you can focus on coloring, I will have it linked in the description as well. And if you like this video, I do them every month on Patreon. The link to that will be in the description too. So what we're gonna start off is to mark out the highlights in our photo, and for my style, I like to keep and use one color to even out the entire thing. So I'm using E090 or eggshell white. It's a very safe color to start off with. It's also a very good base color for skin tones. Even if you're painting dark skin colors, it's just nice to have a good base, especially if you want to separate your portrait from your background. So you'll see that while I like this for skin colors, I'm also using it to mark out her hair too. And I'm trying to follow the flow of her hair when I do this. Even though we are going very dark with her hair, there's still going to be gaps, especially if we're going for a very glossy look with our photo. We're still going to have those gaps even if we are using very dark colors mostly for her hair. So I'm still following the contours of her hair, how it's going to flow on her, and also gonna leave out little gaps in there for highlight, not so much since we're planning on going over the entire thing with dark colors anyway. So now we're gonna go on to her face, and I'm starting with her nose. And as you can see, I'm leaving out bright areas of highlight, but mostly what we're gonna be doing is sculpting out her face for this initial layer. And this is when it's gonna start to be very nerve-wracking, especially if you're just starting out with markers. And I'm telling you to just trust the process. It looks like it could be daunting right now, but that's only because this is our brightest colors. Even if you do mess out right now for this area, it's going to be very to mask it with the darker colors after. So try not to worry too much about this. The thing that we're doing is just leaving out the highlights. We're still following the contours of her face. I like using the brush tip for this, and I think in general I just like using it more now. Before, if I wanted to go for a more sketchy look, I would use the chisel tip, but for this with a smaller portrait, I'm using the brush end. And as you can see, even though it's one color and we even use that color for her hair, because we're leaving out bright areas of highlights on the highlight points of her face, we can still see her features almost. And even though we've just started out and we've only used one color, we already have a good base to build off of with our other colors later. So the next marker that we are using is also a very light color. This one is E470 or Tea Rose. For now, we're using very sheer colors on top of each other, but the main thing is that we're banking on both of them having different undertones and different hues on them, that they will already add contrast to our portrait. So what we're gonna do now is paint around the very first layer that we had. So while for the first layer we were mostly going over the entire thing and just leaving out highlights, now what I'm gonna do is be more selective of where we add this sort of more pinkish undertone to this marker. So we're going on her nose, her lips, on the corners of her eyes, but also I want to focus them on her cheeks where hers are very chiseled. So I want to add more dimension to them, not just that initial layer. And again, this could be very daunting just because markers don't really blend out that much, and maybe it's just because it's not the main medium I work with, but it's very hard to blend it out to be smooth. And so what we try to do is go over the contours of the face and try to follow those areas along. But again, the very main thing to keep note of is that these are the lightest colors in our portrait, and they're gonna be drowned out, they're gonna be evened out once we add the darker colors. So try not to be intimidated too much by it. Just try to enjoy the process as much as you can, and also pay attention to the reference photo. Try to see where her face is more sculpted and get those. The reference photo again is also linked in the description. And once more, since I'm going for more of a stylistic approach with this portrait, I'm also still using the same color for her hair. We're gonna do the separation between the two later on, but this is just gonna make the lighting look more cohesive when we add more to our portrait. So our third color is called Lipstick Natural. This one is probably my favorite color to use in portraits, but I love this one because it's more of a neutral color compared to the other two. And again, these three colors are still very sheer, so you'll see that they'll show up on top of each other, but they won't drown each other out. I'm using this lipstick color now to add in the darker areas of the photo. I'm first using it on the hair because I'm not sure how much dimension I'm gonna add to her face, and so since it's a little bit of a more darker neutral color, I have it added on her hair first so I can see how it will look, and also so I can see how much dimension I wanted for her face, if I wanted it to be super dark. And I just decided to use the color on very precise areas of her face, so some parts of her eyes, on the edges of them, and on her eyebrows too. But mostly I want to leave out her face just this color, since I really like the dimension that I got with the first two layers. And then I will also use the same color to layer onto itself to add dimension. Some markers are more buildable than others. I think that these more sheer ones layer on top of themselves better than I think the darker ones do, so I'm taking advantage of that and just adding in these darker areas on her hair with the same marker. So the next color that I want to add onto there is R110, and this is a very bright peachy color, so I want to use it to add brightness to her face. And because this is still a sheer color, it will just layer on top of the other ones beautifully. And again, we're being more strategic with where we put this color, because if we use it to go over the entire thing like we did on the first layer, her face would end up looking too orange, and we don't want that. So trying to keep looking at the reference photo where I can place these more vibrant colors on her, but still not too much, and also still bring that same color over to her hair, so that where there are gaps on her hair, when we add in the darker colors, the lighting will still look more cohesive. So the next color that we are using is R23, and this is the first color that we're working with that I would say is a little less sheer than the colors underneath it. So it's very bright, and while we were selective with the layer underneath it, we have to be more selective of where we put this one. I am also using the same color because I already have the colors of her hair planned at this point, and so I want to use it to add this very punchy color on her hair so that it will show up against the darker colors. Because I'm really planning on using very dark colors for her hair, I need a darker, more brighter color to make the colors on her hair look more interesting. And so you can see this is mostly done on her hair, where I am now following the flow of her hair strands. Now we're drawing in the movement of her hair, where her hair strands are going. And this color is so bright, it sort of gives the look of a highlighter, But that is what we want. Try not to be discouraged with how this looks right now, because we will be adding more darker layers for her hair. And again, that's also why we didn't add this color too much to her face. We're gonna be using it mostly to add more dimension to her hair. So the next color that we're gonna use is BR1, or Raw Umber. And I think this color is definitely, I wouldn't consider it to be sheer. So this now, we're gonna use it for her hair first, and look at how dark this color is. As soon as we added that in, we're almost starting to lose the contours of her face and dimensions on her face because this color is so dark. I do think from looking at the video now, I do think that it's not as opaque as I thought it was, but again, the technique would still remain the same. I still wanted to first just use it to mark out where the darkest colors are, and I'm also just using it entirely on her hair at this point because I wanted to see how it will affect the contrast on the rest of the photo. Since I wanted her hair to be super dark, I am starting my lines from where her hair is the darkest, and then also try to take advantage of this brush marker. And it's just the best, I think, for drawing hair because the strokes that I can get with it are so nice and soft, and so I like drawing especially wavy hair with this marker, and I'm taking advantage of that. I do still keep in mind the layers that I added underneath it, and that's why there's gaps on her hair right there where we're leaving it just like that. These are now the main colors of her hair. The layers underneath just added more dimension to the colors on them. So I want to add even more dimension to her hair by layering in a dark, cooler color this time. So I am using BG209, or blue gray, and I'm again just being very precise with where I put them. I've touched them mostly where her hair touches her face, so I can also contour out her face. You can see adding these lines in just makes her face look more sculpted because those areas are super dark. And I also just added in the side contours of her shoulders and her neckline just to add more shape to our drawing, really. And then we will be going back to the edges of her hair and defining them more. So you can see this color is so opaque that it's not really worth it to layer with this color by itself, and so we're just taking advantage of that dark color to add more structure to our drawing. So now we're gonna do something I like to do, which is layer a sheer color on top of darker ones. And since I'm just looking at the drawing now and I'm seeing that it's too pink, what I want to do is add a very sheer and vibrant warm color this time, and I'm gonna use E490, which is a deep orange, and I'm just gonna use that to add warmth back to her hair. So you can see, even though it's sheer, just adding that color on there immediately just casts a warmer shadow to her hair without disturbing the structure of it that the darker colors did underneath it. I'm also just very lightly putting it on her face too, being very precise though, because we don't want to overdo it, because I already like the structures that I got on her face. So I'm just being very selective with where I put this there. Take advantage of the finer lines we can get with the brush nib so we don't overdo it and darken up her face too much. So the next color that we're using is yellow gray, and we're just gonna use that on her eyes and also her shirt, so we can bring that color to another part of the painting too. And this is so weird because I always thought she had green eyes, but apparently she had blue eyes. On this photo though, I thought they were green, so that's why I'm using a very warm gray. I'm also using a warm gray instead of a green so it doesn't show up too much against the brighter colors we already had. But as you can see, it shows up to be very green because there's so much red on her hair. This just brought out the greenness of the gray, if that makes sense. So the next thing that I'm gonna do is use a colored pencil to draw in the very finer details of the drawing. And that's the one lesson I have learned from using alcohol markers, is that when it comes to these very sharp details, just do them with pens or colored pencils. I try not to stress myself too much with getting details from the alcohol markers because that's just not something that I have found success with. So I just use colored pencils for them. And as you can see, just brings the entire thing together. I try not to overpower the layers that I put in with the alcohol markers so it still looks like alcohol markers. But yeah, just use these colored pencils to add more detail to our drawing. I am using a maroon color so it doesn't just step away too much from our color scheme, because I think if I had used black that would have been too overpowering, and I wanted to go with similar-ish colors to the color scheme that we already had, and I think it just pulled the whole thing together. I think the only thing that I want to say is to not overdo the lines on teeth when you're drawing someone who's smiling, especially if your drawing is so small like this one. This is smaller than my hand, so we don't want to draw individual teeth when you're doing that, just drawing the lines where they touch, because teeth are very hard to draw and very easy to overdo when you do them. I did also bring my pencil lines to her hair just so I can bring back the texture that I got on her face. I didn't like that it was only focused on her face, so I'm putting that in there. I'm also adding in some lighter hair strands, but again, I'm trying not to overdo it. Just spread out the colored pencil textures onto the rest of the sketch, more like. And so the very last thing that I'm doing is using my white gouache for the highlights on here. I don't think it needed it really. Now that I'm looking at it, I like where it is right now. But I did use it to bring more light back to her eyes. And especially because the lighting is so intense. I think this is a paparazzi shoot, so the flash on her eyes are so apparent. So I want to bring that on there. I also just love this photo of her so much, so I want to get it right. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this, I do them every month on Patreon. Again, thank you for making it through the end. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will be seeing you guys again soon.